Somebody who is so socially focused and caring about what's happening in the world around me just feels so fatigued from all of this. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that is self-serving for these individuals and not in the best interest of Canada.
That's always been the case in every government. These are insiders, but saying that the people inside Trudeau's government were always saying he was never in charge. I wouldn't be able to do that if I'm fighting in internal battles. Okay? This basically was blaming everybody else, as he's done every time.
Hello and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So in previous episodes, we've spoken a lot about American politics because generally speaking, there wasn't a whole lot of shakeup going on over here in Canada. But recently, some of you may be aware that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has decided to step down. So this has, of course, caused a lot of discussion and opinions, not only in the news, but also in social media. So we figured, why not talk about this a bit as well from our perspective. So let's start out by watching a clip of the speech that he provided and some commentary surrounding it.
So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
So many members of his own government coming to him and saying, we don't believe that you can beat Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre in the next election, an election that has to be held by the end of the year. This really leaves his party in a tough squeeze. The polls already indicate that they are more than 20 percentage points behind, and now they're going to have this succession battle, and it will be rough with a lot of different people putting their hat in the ring. In the meantime, you have President-elect Trump coming into office, I don't have to remind you, in 2 weeks, threatening 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods imported into the United States.
So to start out with, I'm not a political science major, I'm a psychotherapist, so I'll preface a lot of my statements with that. I certainly don't have expertise around this, but as a citizen of Canada, of course, this is something that's really concerning to me and something that I've been watching relatively closely, even though politics is not really something that I follow too much. So I guess what I'll say first, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I just can't help but feel this way, I kind of feel bad for the guy. His marriage has failed. Everybody in the country has been shitting on this guy. He's messed up, like there's no doubt about it, and his responsibility is as our leader. But something that just sits not so great with me is just the unpatriotic nature of like the F Trudeau sentiments and all of that stuff. I think that while I recognize the disappointment that our country has in him, some of that makes me feel bad for the guy. But Oren, what are your preliminary thoughts on some of this?
Okay, first, I have zero sympathy, compassion. I can empathize only because I have that ability to take someone else's perspective, but zero sympathy or compassion. You say that his marriage broke down or whatever. We don't know what happened, right? It may be a result of everything we've seen publicly from him, maybe as a person, as a father, as a partner. Again, it's all speculation. But if any of that is true within his personal life, okay, what we see publicly, again, I don't even feel bad for him for the relationship breaking down because there's literally not one good thing I can say about him. I'm sorry, there's one. Okay, I got to say this. And people are mocking him when he was saying, I'm a fighter. And people are saying, yeah, and you're proving you're a fighter by quitting. Okay, so, the one thing I'll say is a number of years ago, he did have a boxing match with Dominic Brazeau, I think he was a senator, okay, a First Nations senator. And Dominic he's a tough guy. I think he was raised in the streets and he was built and jacked and everything. Trudeau didn't only step up, but he actually won. So I'm going to give him that. Okay. And I know there are some physical feats that he can do that I've seen that he does with, showing his core strength. So if you ask me for any positive things about him, those, give him his due. That's literally the only positive thing I can say about him. So there's a lot more I can say, but of course I'll stop now. We'll get back into it after.
So what are your thoughts surrounding the comments that people make? Have you taken issue with it being unpatriotic or kind of crossing a line?
So, I mean, it's obviously crude when people are saying like F Trudeau, especially to his face and everything like that. But you know what? I'm a free speech absolutist, basically. So I think people should have the right to say that. Now, if people were saying, with Trump's, I'm going to call it rhetoric about making Canada the 51st state and so on. Okay. I mean, I see that just as bloviation. I don't see that as anything other than, again, bluster. It's not real. If we're wrong, or if I'm wrong, sorry, I'll come back and acknowledge that from my cell. Okay. But I've heard a number of intelligent, high functioning people saying that they would welcome like an annexation, all right, some kind of different relationship with the states. And I've heard various degrees of what they would welcome. All right. So I can understand from a financial, a tax base, from trading, from all these things, I can understand people saying that. All right. I do to a certain degree. That is completely by definition unpatriotic for sure. Okay. So I understand the logic behind it. Right. But I wouldn't want to, to just bend over and say, yes, please, take us over. That would destroy what we are. Okay. So so that is unpatriotic. So I do think that that's bizarre that some people are so willing to do that. On the other hand, if I had a gun to my head and I was told either you annex, and this might sound like hyperbole, but I would have to, I've really thought about this. I'm not just saying this off the top of my head. If someone said either Canada continues in the path that it is going, right, or you annex with the states in some capacity and you go in the direction it seems to be going, I would take that route, because what I've seen about Canada, where it's going, and this is not just me, and you're right, I'm not a political major as well. I've listened to very many people who do have far more knowledge and intelligence and ability to analyze the situation than I have. Okay. And I try to be unbiased. I listen from, all sides of the spectrum. Right. And I think the most credible and unbiased people truly are saying that they've seen what's happening in Canada in other countries that went a really bad path. And, they often are talking about socialism, communism. We are a, quasi-socialist country, which, in the sense of taking care of the weakest, making sure that we have healthcare, whatever you want to call it, what we have, trying to make sure that people have access and everything like that. I agree in that regard. It has to be done much better, but, I agree in that. But when I hear about going full on socialist or actual communist, when I'm hearing about how many people have infiltrated the different levels of either government or industry within Canada, when I hear how so much of, again, within our different industries, not just government, but other industries, including education, that there are people with very questionable motives, definitely questionable histories and beliefs. When I'm hearing how much power they're having, I am telling you, I don't think it's hyperbole at all. It's not fear mongering. Sorry, when people say that we are going the route of communism, and I'm hearing actual people who come from communist countries saying that. Okay, so that's what worries me. So if I had a choice, I would go the route of of America. Having said that, if Kamala Harris got elected, I think they'd be going in the similar direction. Okay, full on communism? No, I don't. I think America's structure wouldn't allow that to happen. But a continued, ongoing deterioration of all the different services we have, of just people feeling no hope. I mean, there's a palpable change since Trump got elected, where even people who don't like Trump, and I'm one of those people, I don't like him, but I'm seeing so many people with a sense of hope. Now, I'm also seeing many people terrified, of course, but I'm seeing a sense of hope. And ever since Trudeau announced his resignation, with the people I'm hearing from, whether it's my patients, whether it's friends, whether it's people I'm seeing online, there's also that sense of hope. Maybe there's a chance to a way to course correct and try to fix all the damage that Trudeau and his colleagues have done, or his cronies have done. That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but I think you touched on a lot of important things. And I guess on the topic of hope, while I may not have a political science background, I am looking at this from the sociological and psychological perspective. And I think that you're completely correct that a lot of people have lost hope. And so I'll put my tinfoil hat on here, because I have been doing that a little bit. I would say a bit lately, because a lot of this doesn't make sense, right? So when things don't make sense, I feel like there's more to it that we're not seeing or not hearing or not fully grasping, or at least myself. So
I think that there's, and this certainly isn't a psychological term, but I think there is some element of outrage fatigue that we're all experiencing, where there is just so much wrong, not only here at home in Canada, but across the world. And I think it's hard for us to maintain our attention and focus on one bad thing. And we are just so fatigued and drained. So interestingly, and this is like especially interesting because when doing some reading for preparation for this episode, I found myself just blatantly not giving a shit. And that's important because I give a shit about a lot of things, hence the whole point of this podcast. So that really struck me as odd that me, somebody who is so socially focused and caring about what's happening in the world around me, just feels so fatigued from all of this. That made me kind of think, well, what else is going on? So that I think leads into exactly what you were saying in terms of, people are observing that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that is self-serving for these individuals and not in the best interest of Canada.
Well, definitely. That's always been the case in every government, right? Or whatever power structure. There's things going behind the scenes that is not in the best interest of the public necessarily, no matter how they sell it. And my hope is always that, somehow the benefit outweighs the damage. That's, and I know that the people who are benefiting the most are truly the people who are in power, whether it's the people outward facing, the government, or the people behind them, the lobbyists, the corporations, all these special interest groups that we know really run the show behind the scenes. I mean, that's the reality. And I have a number of patients who are in politics, at different levels of government in Canada, and the things that they tell me, it makes me so enraged because they all see it, they know it. And I think I may have mentioned this before, but my patients, one of the reasons they feel so despondent is that they actually want to do good. They want to help the country. They want to save money. They want to cut, they want to do what's best for the government. For the people. That's why they joined government. And they're seeing that they are the anomaly within the system. And so it's enraging when I hear that. Obviously not the only people, but those kind of people are the minority. And it's not just the ones with the best intentions. It's also the most capable, and the best and brightest and most capable are not the ones who get elevated within our government. Really, it's not. And it's not just DEI. DEI has destroyed our country. It really has. Sorry, that's hyperbole. Sorry. DEI has contributed to, I think, a degradation of our country on every single level. Right? Every single service system and so on. And we know that we've talked about that a lot. I get that. But it's not just that. This predates DEI. It's politics within politics. It's the people who can kiss ass the best. It's the people who have the contacts and so on, or who can somehow exert influence, because they have either money or resources or something that the people in power want. So and those are the people who get elevated, or they elevate their own people. And again, seeing how the sausage is made, it really upsets the stomach, when it comes to politics. So, and by the way, just earlier today, I was listening to our old friend Scott Adams, and he was talking about how he was hearing some people saying, and I don't know who it was, these are insiders, but saying that the people inside Trudeau's government were always saying he was never in charge. They said, now again, this is all just hearsay, so I don't know if it's true or not. Okay, it's like fifth-hand information, but they were saying that Trudeau didn't read the papers, Trudeau really wasn't on top of things, that he was considered a relationship manager. He's the one, he's the pretty face. He's the one out there. He's trying to make this all more palatable to the public as they're shoveling shit down our throats. We're supposed to, he's trying to tell us that it's pudding. So, and that he's supposed to help, I guess, keep the peace among all the different insiders and all the people, around him and everything. That's what they were saying, that he did not dictate policy at all. So maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. It would make sense given what I think about him, how incompetent I believe he is, how lacking in intellectual rigor I believe he is, how not. Again, this is all my opinion, right? This is my impression from seeing him. I've never assessed him, so I don't know, but seeing him publicly, I think that there's not one sincere bone in his body. I'm sorry. And I just want to say this because that speech, okay, there were two things about that. One is that tone. Again, to me, it just oozed the same insincerity.
It felt like pandering.
It's pandering. It's bad. To me, it always feels like bad acting. And the funny thing is, I posted this a little while ago where I was saying, I've had some people in my life who say, oh, that Trudeau speech when his father died. And I think Trudeau was 29 at the time. Okay. And he gave his speech in front of everyone, and they're saying it was so passionate and impassioned and blah, blah, blah. And they're saying that, and they go, so some of them, that was what led them to see him today, and they don't see all the flaws today. Or some of them said, I remember him back then. Why has he become the way he has? And I've actually gotten the clip, on YouTube. I show them, I say, watch it again. And most of them look and they go, that's not how I remember it. Okay. And it's funny because I wrote on X, I said, to me, when I first saw it live, okay, I said, it looks like a junior high school actor, like a bad theater student, okay, junior high school. And it's funny. So Barbara Kay.
Wasn't he a drama teacher?
He was a drama teacher, yes. Okay. And obviously not a very good one if that's how he acts. So, but again, I said, it's very specific about a drama student, because not just bad acting. There's all this, this emoting and blah, blah, blah. And it's, that's what adds the insincerity. So Barbara Kay, a newspaper columnist and a writer, she said that this is why, she said, a lot of the Jewish women call him, they basically say he's like a 13-year-old Jewish boy. And so the meaning is like at the bar mitzvah. Now I've not been to many. I think I've been to one bar mitzvah, so I haven't really seen it. But apparently, like these little Jewish 13-year-old boys trying to make these grandiose speeches and blah 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 in front of everyone. They speak in the same kind of with that manner and cadence and so on. And so that's what they're all saying. Basically, it's as insincere as that. And as someone who lacks the self-awareness to know how bad they look. Okay, but he was 29 when he did that speech, right? And people should say, well, you shouldn't. Some people say, well, why are you picking on? It's the funeral, blah blah. If he had been crying, if he was unable to get the words out, if he stumbled, I wouldn't pick on him because it's an emotional time. I'd say, no, that speech just shows how insincere he is. And I urge everybody, find it. Just type in, Trudeau's speech at his father's funeral or procession, whatever you call it. Watch it. And that, I think, encapsulates who he is. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not diagnosing him here, but that's my impression of him. So the speech a few days ago when he resigned, to me, it felt the same. It wasn't as, again, he didn't emote as much, okay, but it was as insincere. And by the way, one more thing before I forget, when he said, Canada deserves the best, or the Liberal Party deserves the best, whatever, I wouldn't be able to do that if I'm fighting in, internal battles, okay? Instead of saying something else, well, there's some disagreement, but, if the consensus is that, we need new leadership, or I want to do what's best for the party or something like that, at least that's a bit more gracious. This basically was blaming everybody else, as he's done every time. I don't know if I've ever heard him take full-on actual accountability for the things that he's done wrong. I don't hear it. And every time you think he's sort of doing it, he'll throw in some either lie or a distortion or some kind of passive-aggressive comment, which is unfortunately typical for many people in certain, let's say, political orientations or ideologies. They do the same thing all the time. But again, even in that speech, the resignation speech, he's blaming others. It's not I'm not leaving because I know I'm going to lose. I'm not leaving because that's what the country wants. I'm leaving because I don't want to have to fight these traitors in my party. Okay, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I see all of that too, and you've countered most of the point that I was about to just make, but just to play devil's advocate at least somewhat here, I think in part, though, being in a position of leadership, whether it's as our prime minister or otherwise, you do have to put up a certain face. Even if like the shit's hitting the fan in the background, you have to show up and, keep a straight face, keep the game face on, and keep things moving. So in his defense, with him not showing too much real emotion, I wonder if there is some element of leadership strategy there, perhaps not, based on some of those other things that you said there. But that's a thought that came to mind.
Well, but it's not that I'm saying he didn't show any emotion. Like, he didn't show real emotion because he never does.
Real emotion, yeah.
Yeah. It's, again, even when people give speeches, he's been in the public long enough, in the spotlight long enough, that he should know how to be able to deliver something. I think that lack of sincerity just negates the ability to be able to, again, to even pretend to be sincere. All right. Because even if you're acting, again, like I've done, I've done so many interviews publicly, but the ones that were the hardest was when I was brought onto certain TV shows where there was a script. Okay. And I had to, say the script. I couldn't be spontaneous. And I watched, I go, ugh. It didn't sound like I was being insincere, but it sounded like I was scripted. There is a
Right.
difference. There's scripted and then there's insincere. And again, so in that speech, there was that emotion, but it just wasn't as, as grandiose as at his father's funeral, but it was still there. I did see it, but it was just, again, the emotion I see is one of insincerity. Okay. That's
Yeah.
right.
And that scriptedness, that's what I thought as soon as I watched it. I was like, he didn't write this. These aren't his words. Somebody told him to say this and he's just saying words. I didn't feel any sincere emotion either. So back to what you were saying before, that and I just want to clarify to make sure I understood correctly. So you've heard that some watched that and maybe had a more positive impression and then rewatched it and then realized that it was insincere.
No, it was about the funeral.
The funeral, okay.
Yes, yeah, because it was so long ago. I think it was like 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, maybe. I think it was about 20, 24 years ago when he gave that speech. So people's memories, they had an image of him.
Right.
And look, we know as humans, we're not analytical machines, most of us. So we go by emotion, we go by feeling, we go by, sentiment. So they were just remembering this. It's for whatever reason. I guess because they have such fondness for the Trudeau family. I mean, he's our Kennedys, right? So the same with the Kennedys. If you look at the Kennedy family for who they really are, there's very few good things you can say about them. I mean, some of the Kennedys did some good things, but also just the behind the scenes of just what let's say they were what they call Camelot in the States, right? But the reality is it's pretty not the greatest family at all, okay?
Yeah.
Right? But there's that image, and I think that Trudeau had that as well. And of course, he rode his father's coattails. I mean, if he had come off just on the scene without any name, I would hope that he would not have ever got elected in the first place.
Yeah. And I think what's at play there as far as the image of the family, and I'll say the image of Trudeau and his representation of the party, I think there is a level of cognitive dissonance that exists that everybody who knows me knows that I don't talk about religion and politics, but I do find myself talking a lot more about politics lately because of all of this going on and the way in which it's affected me. So I always used to support the Liberal Party back when they were true liberals.
Right.
But over the 9 years of his leadership, the Liberal Party has twisted into something that it wasn't before. So the cognitive dissonance that I'm referring to here is I think that many people are still holding on to what it was and hoping or expecting that it either is still that or will morph back into that. But the reality is they were in the center and now they're not. They've gone so far left that they're unrecognizable, but the name is still the same and the leader is still the same.
Right. And yeah, it's very tricky when, politics, it's one of the identities, one that people hold more strongly than most identities. And so, so when you've identified with this organization, this party for so long, and you have the same, or you thought you had the same values, ideals, agendas, and so on, it can be very difficult, as you say, to recognize when they have shifted so much because, it's almost like you're losing a body part. It's part of it. Right. So, there is a lot of cognitive dissonance. And as we've talked about many times, the average person is not rational. And so when you see the evidence that what you thought was true is not, the average person initially is not able to step back and see this objectively or as objectively as possible and say, whoa, okay, they're changing. I need to rethink this. Instead, they distort reality. They'll shoot the messenger. They'll be upset with the person who's pointing out, how things have changed, how things have gone sideways. And it takes quite some time for them to finally be able to unhook themselves from, from those old beliefs, because it's very hard. And again, we've talked about this before with cognitive dissonance reduction. It's the fact that people, the average quote unquote healthy person in North America wants to see him or herself as good and smart. And so if you do something that's not so good or not so smart, most people have a hard time being able to say, I am good, I am smart, but I did something stupid or bad. Rather, it's if I did something stupid or bad, that means I'm stupid or bad. That clashes with my belief of I am good or right. So they can't handle that. So they distort reality. And that's, in a nutshell, the process. So it does take a lot for most people to be able to unhook themselves, from those previous beliefs, no matter how strong the evidence is. And Trudeau pushed and pushed and pushed, or Trudeau and everybody else in the party. And now finally, people are seeing reality for what it is. But the problem is, and I don't know Pierre Poilievre. I don't know him personally. A few years ago, I used to like, just because of how snarky he was and how I liked his attitude. But quite frankly, I don't think he's sincere at all. He spent most of his life in politics. I don't trust someone who's lived virtually his entire life in politics or adult life. So I don't think he has strong values. I think he's an opportunist. People say he's a populist. There's not necessarily something wrong with a populist. It depends on how it plays out. Okay, but for the people. I'm just concerned because, again, the average person is not that analytical. So it's more of swinging, between extremes. And so instead of saying, okay, well, I definitely don't want Trudeau. However, Poilievre has not shown me that he can truly, he hasn't really stricken me as, like I said, this sincere, value-driven person who's going to be solid, blah, blah. I don't know that yet. Okay. So, but a lot of people, they can't say that. Instead, they go, he's going to save us. He's going to reverse course. He's going to, and they're going to be in for a big surprise because he's not going to do all of that. I hope he'll do some, right? But we have to see him. We have to see him accurately. Otherwise, we're going to have the same problem that always happens when you switch from one government to the other. It's just because you're so turned off by one government, they are not going to come back for several cycles. And in the meantime, you're saying, no, I just can't ever go back to that. So you take the other choice and you're not holding them to account as much as you should. And I really hope people are going to hold Pierre Poilievre to account, not just seeing him as the savior, but seeing him realistically. And again, like I said, I just haven't seen enough of him to think that he's going to save us. Anyone's better than Trudeau at this point, or Jagmeet Singh, quite frankly.
Well, and I recognize the hypocrisy of what I'm going to say because it's awfully crass what I'm about to say here, but and very uneducated sounding as well. But I think ultimately we're in a situation of same shit, different pile. Like, I don't think that anybody, any party, any person is going to save us the way that people are suggesting that may happen. I think that, again, all of these individuals seem very self-interested and have some sort of plan or agenda already in play. And it's just a matter of convincing people to put them in power.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's, I think, realistic. And so, like I said, I think we have to be so vigilant. I hope the country is very vigilant, and just make sure that, again, we hold people to account and also be realistic in our expectations. Because the worst thing would be if Poilievre doesn't do enough. Let's say he's trying and the government is trying to make these changes, but there's so much damage has already been done and they're on the path to doing it. And everyone says, well, no, it's not enough, or he lied, and suddenly go back to, to the other choice, whether it's Liberal or NDP, either of which I believe would be a disaster. So, I just have to be very clear here. I historically as well, when the Liberal Party was Liberal, I voted Liberal. I used to vote NDP, depending in the different levels of government. So I am. People don't believe it, but I am. A liberal at heart, for sure. Okay. But I'm not a leftist anymore. And I used to be a leftist, until leftism became socialism and communism. Right. So anyway, I
is, if I can just touch on that, that's a scary thing too, I think, because many of us are finding ourselves in this like political no man's land, right? Where I guess, looking at myself, I guess I should be conservative given my religious values. I'm a business owner, et cetera, but I don't think that everyone's able to really find themselves identifying as solidly as perhaps in the past.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think that's wise, because if people identify too rigidly and too, they adhere to it too powerfully, they can't see the problems, they can't see the changes. They say, "No, I'm this for life." So I think it is good to be able to say, "I am," right? Yeah. But I don't think enough people are. I really don't. And again, back to this whole idea of hope, whether it's the Trump effect, whether it's Trudeau resigning, whether it's all these other changes in Western governments recently, right? It does seem that I'm again, not for everybody, because I know a lot of people are panicking. They're thinking that it's going to be Armageddon, that, the far right is taking over the world and everything, right? So, but I am seeing a lot of reasonable people. I'm seeing people in positions of authority, of power, of influence, the ones who know more about these things than I do, and whether they're patients, friends, people on the internet. But I am seeing so many, like I said, and I think it's so important. They're finally saying, "I'm having a sense of hope." I really am. And I've had, just so you know, and you've probably heard this as well, I've had a number of patients, again, high level patients in society saying, I'm really seriously contemplating leaving Canada. I just can't
Yeah.
do it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's not unique. Lots of people leave countries, and it's usually it's either because of taxes or policies or both.
Or both. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what I'm hearing. It's not so much, the identity is changing and so on. It's more about it's having a direct impact on my family and my life.
Yeah.
Right. So, so I want people to have hope. I really do. Again, not false hope, but some hope, because without hope, what do we have?
Exactly. And I guess hope is our word of the day today, because I think that is really all that we can have in moments like this, when we are feeling overwhelmed and fatigued and unsure, and like there isn't a whole lot of guidance. And I think that many people in these situations then choose to not vote. And I don't think, again, looking at our patriotic duty, looking at our duty as citizens, I think we still need to ensure that our say is heard. And I think doing as much reading and research and relying on reliable sources of information to discern, where do you stand politically now and who fits the most with your values? Because I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, is values. And like I alluded to before, my values, I think, in large part have stayed the same, but the political climate has changed so drastically that I need to now kind of find my home politically as well. So I think that many people are probably going to find themselves in that same position.
Yeah, and I do hope you're right. First of all, you said to find credible sources. It's so hard to know what is credible.
Yeah.
So, right. So, I encourage people all the time. You try to find credible sources, talk to people that you trust, ask who they listen to. Right. And then also, again, you try to go around the spectrum. You don't just go into your camp. You find people on other sides. Even if you disagree with them, at least it's like, oh, hey, I hadn't thought about that. Or that's a different perspective than what I've been told. And try to do it with an open mind. And what's so important, and this is, it goes back to the ability to fight cognitive dissonance reduction, is recognizing that changing my opinion based on facts or information that I wasn't aware of or a different perspective, that doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a flip-flopper. It makes you better informed. And it's a sign that you're not so arrogant, that you do have the ability to revise or adapt your, beliefs, perspectives, and so on, with more information. That's a high functioning person who's able to do that. It's not flip flopping. So I do hope people do leave themselves as open, or try to be as open minded as possible, and not to take it personally. That's the whole thing. Again, being wrong about something or changing your opinion. I mean, it is something you're doing personally, but it doesn't mean that you as a human being are a bad person, right? It means you're a better citizen when you're better informed, again, and you have the ability to make decisions based on what's going on up here, not what's in your heart.
Absolutely. So listeners, we want to hear what you think in the comments about Trudeau stepping down, about what we've discussed today. Are you finding yourself in a position where you have to reevaluate your political views? Let us know. Okay.
And I'm going to leave one more thing before we go on this, which is back to this, this feeling of hope. There's one more thing, which is I am hearing people, and it's ever since Trump was elected, but even with Trudeau, okay, in the last couple of months, I am hearing so many people of all ages saying, I feel finally that I'm able to talk more freely. Right. I'm not so worried. Now, we still have some laws on the books that make it hard to talk as freely as we should, or to make it to be able to practice as freely as we should be able to. But there is that sense. And just even that, when I'm listening to people talking, they're going, yeah, I'm able to say things, whether it's at a family dinner or online, that I would be terrified to say before. And I will say to all the people who were able to say this before, you've been saying it. I've been saying it, much to the chagrin of many of our colleagues and friends, and, at risk to our reputations and to our careers. But what I'll say is this: if you're one of those people who has been speaking out for many years, whether it's about COVID or about politics or about what have you, right, or political correctness, gender ideology, whatever it is, if people finally are coming around, not because there's more evidence, but simply because now it's safer to do so, don't begrudge them. Welcome them with open arms, right? You might be a little bit suspicious. Are they doing it because, for cynical reasons? Are they doing it out of self-interest? Or are they doing it because, once again, either, wow, I had no idea, or I always knew, but now I feel safe enough to. It doesn't matter if they come on the side with good intention, not the cynical or self-serving reasons, but if they come with good intention, welcome them. Don't make them feel like crap, okay? Because that's how we, implement change, is getting more people on board. So.
And isn't that ironic, the safety, right? Safety, I think, was weaponized for such a long time with all the DEI initiatives and all the leftist ways of being. But I think you're right that people who are open-minded and maybe more centrist or logical do feel safe now. So I just wanted to point out that irony, that weaponized safety seems to really be coming to fruition in a real way.
Right. Well, and yeah, so on these hopeful and let's say safer notes, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.